The Ebola epidemic in Africa has created a global health emergency. An infectious disease expert provides the information you need to understand this deadly virus. I'm Angela Ray. This is DC Breakdown. Let's get started.
Breaking through the rhetoric, breaking down the issues. From the nation's capital, this is DC Breakdown.
The Ebola epidemic in West Africa is showing no signs of slowing down. The World Health Organization reports more than 3,700 confirmed cases of the disease and more than 2,000 deaths just this year. We're joined by Dr. Jason Bailey, an infectious disease specialist with Providence Hospital here in Washington, D.C., to talk about this highly contagious virus. Is it a virus?
It is a virus, yes.
And why is this time it more, it's bigger, it's badder, it's scarier this time? Why?
I think it has a lot to do with how it originated. So most people don't know is that Ebola is not something that's air transmitted or that goes through the air. It's through contact. And the first cases that came up for this epidemic was in March of 2014, and they first popped up in Guinea. And in Guinea, where you have tribes that are exposed to eating bush meat and things of that nature.
They eat bats.
Yes.
They eat wild antelope.
Exactly.
Exactly. And monkeys.
Exactly. And that's why we don't know the natural reservoir for Ebola. That's our best guess as far as where this epidemic came from. And there was 49 confirmed cases in late March of 2013. Those were the first one, and that ballooned up to 62, and then it just continued to spread as more people were exposed to people who had Ebola. And it only takes contact with that person, usually through sweat, usually through urine secretions. If you're in contact with a person with Ebola, that's your highest risk. If you're not in contact with somebody with Ebola or anywhere near an area where you're in contact with somebody with Ebola, you're not likely to catch it.
Okay, so can you explain to me what is it in a bat, in monkeys, in antelope? What is it in them that is causing the Ebola virus?
Well, like we said, we don't know the natural human reservoir the natural reservoir for Ebola, but we do know that from secretions, from droppings, from things of that nature, that's where it actually comes from, and that's our best guess. So, but there's still more research being done in that area to determine exactly what is the viral particle that spreads it to humans.
And this is more scary than other outbreaks because, tell me why.
Because of the nature of it. I mean, it's the sheer spread of it, the contact. I think people are living closer together these days as the population increases, and so as you're in contact with more people and they're living closer together, you have a higher chance of spreading the virus.
And in West Africa, because countries can be relatively close to each other, you're moving in between borders.
Exactly.
And as a result, it has moved along further than in most situations.
So it's in Guinea with the first cases, but now it's in Nigeria, it's in Senegal, it's in Sierra Leone. There actually was a case that's Liberia too, and there's a case that actually is unrelated to this current epidemic. It's in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's at least one case there.
Really?
From there. So.
And you say it's unrelated to this. Why?
Because it's the location. Like we think this is unrelated to the cases that started on the.
We can't find any link that somebody who was here ended up. Wow.
Right.
Okay.
We don't know.
All right. So let's talk about the symptoms.
Sure.
What is it like initially when you've got the Ebola virus, but you may not know because some of the symptoms sound like other stuff?
Yeah, they sound like the normal stuff you have. You can have fevers, you can have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, and then eventually they will progress.
Then it gets ugly.
Then it gets really ugly. Usually the symptoms start with, it's between 2 to 21 days is the incubation time for Ebola, but most people present between 8 to 10 days after their exposure to somebody with Ebola.
Okay.
And they'll be coming with these fevers, headaches, GI symptoms. That's why when somebody comes from overseas from my hospital, it's from one of the endemic nations, they automatically get quarantined in a room where people have to come in with contact precautions, with masks on for droplet precautions to make sure that they are protected against that person.
So you have had people from Providence Hospital who have gone to West Africa to actually work with the Ebola virus there, or they just happen to be on the continent?
They just happen to be from the continent.
Got you.
Exactly. And they come over, and that's your automatic precaution that you have, that you have to set up when they come in through your door.
So explain to us how this works. So you're in a West African nation. you don't have Ebola.
Right.
But somebody in your family does. And you begin to take care of that person. Tell me what happens.
Well, that's point of contact.
And you take care of them without protective gear.
Right. That is your source. That is the source of a lot of people, is that they're taking care of family members who are sick and they get sick. And then same thing happens. It happens over and over again as they spread it to family members, to people in the community, grocery stores, that type of thing. Buses, sweat is one means of transmission too, and people sweat a lot of times and they don't know they're sweating. So, yeah. So contact is the major way of transmission.
And from my understanding, there are people in West Africa who are not, they don't have the antibodies for, I don't know how to put this because you're the doctor, but there's antibodies that are there for people who don't get Ebola, that perhaps those antibodies can be used to help people who do have Ebola.
Yes.
Help me out, the non-doctor here. I'm trying to articulate it.
Well, no, like actually the people that have found who are dying from Ebola, so around between 60 to 65% of people actually pass from Ebola. And the people who died, what they're finding is that they don't mount the same immune response that some of the people who survived the Ebola did. Some of the new experimental therapies, you might have heard about the 2 CDC docs, who were treated. They got this new drug called ZMapp. And ZMapp is something that works with your body's immune system to strengthen it to actually fight the virus once it's in your body.
But there is no cure.
There is no cure for Ebola,
but we're working on one.
We're working on one. They're starting vaccine trials, the CDC, within the next month, working with pharmaceutical companies in order to develop vaccines for this.
All right, I need to talk to the people here in the United States, because we've had people who have come from West Africa. They've returned here to the United States. A couple of them we know are doing very well. I know the doctor from Nebraska has, he's right, exactly. He's now back here in the States. We are concerned, Americans, quite frankly, that this is going to be a problem for us. Can you allay our concerns?
That's really a loaded question right now.
Come on, Dr.
This is going to be a soundbite that's going to come back to me much later down the line when we're talking about Outbreak or something like that, like the movie. But what I'm saying is that just based on the route of transmission and what we're doing, we should be able to contain this. If you isolate the people who are exposed, and typically the isolation days is 21 days. If you don't have symptoms after 21 days, then you can be released out of quarantine and be fine. So as long as you're able to quarantine these people for 21 days and with no symptoms, you should literally not have any cases in the United States. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have cases in the U.S. It just means that these are the routes that we're taking. And we're screening people at airports, we're screening people all over to make sure that they don't have any symptoms of this.
So that's it, because I was going to ask you, that's where we're handling it. We're screening people as they're coming off of flights.
Right. From endemic nations.
From endemic nations, right.
Correct.
And again, the people who have been brought back here to the United States, tell me what they've been given ZMapp, you said.
ZMapp, yeah.
So will the Ebola virus remain in their bodies? Could they have a flare-up again?
You're always going to have antibodies,
that word I tried to get,
that are going to be, because your body's going to try to fight them off. But we don't know enough about, ZMapp, or even if that had anything to do with stopping their disease process. We have to do trials in order to determine a lot of that stuff.
Prior to this outbreak, where so many Americans seem to be impacted, was there any indication that we were going to be looking for a cure for Ebola? Was anybody working on a cure?
I don't know as actively.
See, this is, so we're reacting. We weren't being proactive, because when Ebola struck before, it typically just involved people in Africa.
Right.
I don't recall cases where, doctors or aid workers or whatever were brought back to the United States.
Right.
So this is a different deal.
This is a different deal. That's because this is the largest outbreak so far. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. So they're really sort of ramping up efforts in order to get this under control, especially as so many people are traveling back and forth through different countries. I mean, they're projecting that cases will reach Europe, England, places like that pretty soon. And then the U.S., there will be probably 1 or 2 cases that come to the U.S. at some point from people who get off of planes, that nature. And so that's why they're ramping up efforts towards it.
Well, I do want to let you know what they're doing in other countries right now. Sierra Leone has a 4-day nationwide lockdown. You cannot leave your home.
Right.
Senegal has closed the border with Guinea since August 21st. Liberia has 50 new cases.
Yep.
You know, it's just, it's scary.
It is scary, but I don't think everybody should be terrified, you know, in this country. If you're from, you know, an endemic nation, obviously, but there are certain things that are happening. Like, I guess that one of the Ebola clinics was actually raided a few weeks ago, and people was, it was raided. Yeah, vandals went in and raided an Ebola clinic in one of the countries, and so that type of stuff is sort of the ridiculous stuff that we won't likely see here, you know, in this country. So, I don't know. I don't think people in the U.S. have anything to worry about at this moment. Okay. And I'm going to say that at this moment.
That's right. Because we don't know where things are going to go.
We don't know where things are going to go.
Well, we're going to keep in touch with you, Dr. Jason Bailey with Providence Hospital. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to us about this very important and, quite frankly, frightening situation we have.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Up next, what you need to know about your all-access pass to online content and why some companies would like to change what's often referred to as net neutrality. That's next.